Wills. I'm a research biologist for DNR Fisheries Division and the manager of the Lake St. Clair Research Station. This is the first talk that I've given in a while that I didn't have to do any slides for. So I want to acknowledge Jim Francis, Sarah Thomas in our Lake Erie Management Unit, Jan Hesenauer and Andrew Briggs at our Lake St. Clair Station. If you like the slides, thank you. If you don't, talk to me. I'll get you in touch with the person who made them. So to start out, I've got a lot of stuff to go through here. So just to give you an idea where I'm going with this, we'll talk a little bit about the Lake Erie fishery, walleye and yellow perch, a couple highlights from Lake St. Clair with smallmouth bass and some program changes that we're making for those, as well as our forage assessment. Everybody's favorite lately, acoustic telemetry. Talk a little bit about the St. Clair River Lake Sturgeon assessment that we do, and then I'm totally going to step out of my comfort zone and talk about red swamp crayfish. So Lake Erie walleye, if you've been fishing out there, you know that walleye fishing in the Western Basin all through the St. Clair Detroit River system is absolutely incredible right now. You can see the population trends there. Projection for 2023 was like almost 89 million fish. It's down a little bit for 2024, still 72 million fish. Spoiler alert, it will be a 6-fish bag limit again this year in Western Lake Erie. The reason that we're seeing that is the recruitment of young individuals to the adult populations, and reproduction has been absolutely incredible. So if you look on the right-hand side of the graph, you see those green bars are above that black line. That black line is the average for the number of young of year fish that our partners see in the Western Basin Trawl Survey each year. And they have been absolutely off the charts the past 5 or 6 years. When those fish grow another year and get to age 1, again, you can still see that they're well above average. So that year class strength and the subsequent recruitment to those older age 2 individuals is what's responsible for the incredible walleye fishing that we have out there right now. And that's leading to some pretty incredible harvest rates. This is our just through time since early 1990s, angler harvest rates in Michigan waters of the Western Basin, strictly in the recreational fishery. So we're not talking charter fishing here, but you can see in the last 5 out of the 6 years, we have had record harvest rates for walleye. So if you get out there, your chances of taking home a limit are pretty good. And I mean, these harvest rates are absolutely incredible. Moving on to yellow perch, we had a few down years in the past couple of years in the West Basin of Lake Erie, but if you look at the orange line over on the right-hand side of that graph, you can see that it came up a little bit last year in 2023 to a level that's pretty much close to average, a little bit over 100,000 pounds. So that's due to more H2 and 3 fish that are coming into the population right now. Surprisingly, usually when our harvest goes up, our effort goes up with that too. But in 2023, and it's been a trend for the past 4 or 5 years, our angler effort directed towards the yellow perch in the West Basin has actually been going down. So the few anglers that are out there taking advantage of the fishery are actually again seeing some pretty good harvest rates. And similar to walleye, this past year, harvest rates for yellow perch were well above average. Moving on to Lake St. Clair, want to talk a little bit about our smallmouth bass assessment. Primarily, we've done that in the past through our trap net survey in Anchor Bay. And you can see those 4 locations on the screen there where we set trap nets. And that was one of our primary methods of assessing smallmouth bass. We would jaw tag those fish and rely on angler reports to tell us about the movement of those fish by reporting those captured jaw tags. We are going to end that survey. We wrapped that up last year, and we're going to focus on smallmouth bass in a little bit of a different way using different methods. And the reason that we're doing that is we are learning through those jaw tag returns that our assessment in Anchor Bay is probably not representative of the entire lake. If you look at the red dots here, those were fish that were jaw tagged in Anchor Bay in our trap net survey, and were captured again by an angler and reported to us. So probably 5 or 6 years ago, we also started electrofishing in the more southern part of the lake in Michigan waters. It's typically referred to anglers as the Mile Road areas. And those are the blue dots. So those were fish that were jaw tagged in the Mile Road areas, released by us and subsequently recaptured by anglers. And what you can see is that there is not a lot of overlap between the jaw tag returns in red that are from Anchor Bay and the jaw tag returns that are in blue from the Mile Roads. So we thought, well, this is kind of interesting. This, almost looks like they're functioning as separate populations. So we did some acoustic telemetry work, planted the tags in a number of smallmouth bass and let them go. And I'm going to play that here. Again, red tags were Anchor Bay, blue tags were the Mile Roads. And these are the fish moving through time. You can see the kind of the time frame on the bottom of the screen there. And very similar to our jaw tags, we see that there's not a lot of, number one, there's not a lot of mixing. The Anchor Bay fish mostly stay in Anchor Bay. The Mile Roads fish usually stay in the southern part of the lake. But interestingly, those fish do not cross the shipping channel into Canadian waters at all. There are receivers in Canadian waters listening for those tags. We just don't see them crossing. So what we're going to do starting this spring is we're going to expand our electrofishing throughout the lake. We're partnering with Ontario to get tags and fish in Canadian waters. And we're going to look at the movements of smallmouth bass throughout the entire lake because we have that acoustic receiver grid out there that will allow us to do that work and take advantage of that technology. Let that finish here. There we go. This is a graph of the size structure of smallmouth bass in the lake, and it's just separated by categories that correspond to the size of the fish. We have preferred fish, memorable fish, and trophy fish. This is from the literature. They assign size categories. What's remarkable about this is just the size distribution of smallmouth bass in Lake St. Clair is incredible. I mean, if you look at the preferred lengths, those are going up through time. If you look at the memorable lengths, I think we had some pretty good year classes moving through there that caused that spike. But, about 40% of the fish that you can expect to catch are going to be 17 inches or greater. Absolutely incredible. Similarly, the rate at which these fish are dying is it's very, very low. So if you look at our average annual mortality through time, again, that's been decreasing. Those lines are years where we had changes in the fishing regulations. When we went to an earlier spring catch and immediate release season, as well as a year-round catch and immediate release season in 2016, you can see that there's no difference in annual mortality before or after those regulation changes. And in fact, I would say over the entire time series that we have here, the annual mortality rate or the percent of the population that's dying has been trending downward. Another part of our survey program that I want to talk about, and this gets into the forage or, the fish that are out there swimming around serving as food for a lot of the predators and game fish that we like to catch. We've traditionally done two surveys, one in spring, one in fall, where we use our bottom trawl. And pretty much it's like a big sock that we drag through the water that collects the fish. And then we can count those and determine what species and subsequently get an index of how many are there. When we've done this in the fall in the past, it's one way that we document our young of year yellow perch, which are typically the most common species in our fall trawls. And then we do get some other species such as trout perch, round goby, which you all know smallmouth bass like to eat, and log perch. But again, when we have done this survey in the past, we've been limited in where we can carry that out because you can't trawl where there are a lot of where there's a lot of aquatic vegetation. That gear just doesn't work. So that limits us to a very specific area of the lake that we can trawl in the fall. So what we've done is we are moving to what we call micro mesh gill nets. So they are gill nets with teeny sized meshes on them that allow us to assess the forage community. We did 6 of these last year, several hundred fish. Again, most common, yellow perch, log perch, other fish that we would see in our trawl series, but some other fish that we wouldn't catch typically. So this, I think, is going to give us a better picture of not only what forage abundance is across the entire lake rather than in one location that we trawled in the past, but also some of the different species that we might not have been able to capture as effectively within the trawl. Just touching on acoustic telemetry for a moment, we've got a number of acoustic telemetry projects that are ongoing. Muskie and yellow perch, we don't have any further tagging planned for either of those species. Muskie tags are still out there and we're collecting those data. We're analyzing our yellow perch data now. We got some new projects coming online. Who's heard of a moon eye? Anybody ever catch moon eye? Or Laura, awesome, yeah. So we are doing some moon eye telemetry work with Ontario. We're actually going across the border on Monday to tag some fish with them. Northern pike, we started putting acoustic tags in this spring. We'll be doing some of those next week as well. And then that smallmouth bass work that I talked about earlier. Those smallmouth bass in Lake St. Clair are going to be marked with an external tag too. So this is actually a walleye on the right hand of the screen, but you can see that green tag sticking out of its belly. This is a photo of that tag a little bit closer up on the left. It's anchored into the fish when we do the surgeries to implant those tags. So you will see smallmouth bass with those tags and some reporting information on those. So if you catch those fish, go over to that Eyes in the Field site that Justin had showed earlier and report those tag returns to us. St. Clair River lake sturgeon. We've done this survey every year since 1997 in the North Channel of the St. Clair River. Got 80 sets in last year, 67 sturgeon caught, ranging in size from 23.1 to over 70 inches, up to 102 pounds. We tag these fish as well. Typically, a third of the fish that we catch are fish that we have caught in the past and tagged. That was pretty close to that last year. And it was split about 50-50 between juveniles and adults. When you look at the trends through time, you can see the average catch rate that we have here is the dashed line, and the blue line is all sturgeon in the catch. So you can see it cycled up and down around that average. But what's interesting is if you look at the purple and the orange lines, which are juvenile and adult lake sturgeon, for the first time in the time series, probably starting about, I would say 2018, 2019 or so, the number of juvenile lake sturgeon that we have captured on those set lines has exceeded the number of adult lake sturgeon. So we have very good reproduction and recruitment occurring in the North Channel of the Lake St. Clair River and in that part of the system. And that kind of contrasts with what Justin showed you earlier for the Detroit River. We do have a harvest season in the St. Clair River. Justin touched on that, July 15th through September 30th. There's a slot limit. The fish have to be between 42 and 50 inches long inclusive, and you can only take one per year. It's a very, very popular fishery, but it pretty much functions entirely as a catch and release fishery. Our anglers are required to report their harvest to us. Last year in that season, we had a total of 6 fish harvested altogether. So very low harvest. All right, here we go. I'm going to give this a shot. Red swamp crayfish, completely out of my comfort zone. So thanks to our aquatic invasive species staff for giving me a presentation that's pretty easy to walk through here. We had an invasion of red swamp crayfish in Michigan in 2015. In 2015, they were prohibited from the state. Our invasion started in 2017, when the first red swamp crayfish population was found. Today, they are found in over 40 water bodies in 8 complexes. Majority of those are in Southeast Michigan. And these are systems like retention ponds, golf courses, backyard koi ponds, those types of things. Last year, we had detected 9 new infestations in 9 new water bodies. They were in Wayne, Livingston, and Macomb counties, and those were confirmed. You can see them in the lower right corner of that graph on the right side of the screen. And we've been experimenting with a number of different control efforts. Since 2017, we have manually removed 175,000 red swamp crayfish, explored a whole bunch of different techniques for eradicating these things, looked at different lab studies as maybe using fish as a biocontrol technique. And what we have found is that the trapping that we've done has, it's effective at suppressing the populations, but they are never going to eradicate them. And obviously these are a problem because they outcompete our native crayfish. They can do very extensive damage to the water bodies that they incur in themselves. A lot of erosion in the banks occurs from the burrows that these things make. We've also looked at some pesticide treatment. So there is a pesticide called Excite-R, which I believe is, it's pyrethrin. They did 22 treatments in 10 water bodies over the past couple of years. And they did this by implementing a new technique that included like this irrigation line. And you can see this in the following graph or the following photos with that line being stretched out here, and the pesticide is applied through that. What they found is that when they were monitoring these, the pyrethrin concentrations declined very rapidly after application, but you still had crayfish mortalities for 3 to 10 days thereafter. And when they were doing trapping consecutive with this work, they found 95% decreases in the trap catches immediately post-treatment, with minimal impacts to waters downstream, no observed effects on mammals or birds. So this might be promising. They also tried it in the burrows of these crayfish. Again, these crayfish burrow into the banks. And if you really want to get rid of these, we're going to have to find a way to control them in the burrows. It's because of that life history. So they did some combined treatments with the pyrethrin, the Excite-R, and they also used Benseal, which is a bentonite clay sealing agent to fill up those holes. And this stuff is used in like pond sealing, wells, mining, fracking. It just like it plugs up and traps the crayfish in there. So still learning about the different control and eradication techniques. There's been a lot of work that's gone on assessing the impacts of these two, not only the species, but the treatments, because obviously we're going to be treating them. We want to know what the effects of those treatments are on other species within the system. We will be continuing to do surveillance with these. We're working with a number of CISMAs or cooperative invasive species management areas and other watershed groups to document the distribution of these in additional water bodies. Public reports are very helpful. If you find any red swamp crayfish, please let us know. Again, you can report those through the Eyes in the Field on the web, or you can call any of our offices and let us know, but we would greatly appreciate that. And we're also doing some what we call structured decision making, or a process that's an approach for working with our partners and stakeholders on developing a plan to guide our statewide efforts for control of red swamp crayfish. And that work is just beginning to kick off here. So probably be more coming on that in the future. And with that, Erica, I don't know if I have time for questions, but that is all that I have.
When treating for crayfish, particularly in their burrows, you check to make sure an eastern Massasauga rattlesnake isn't using the burrow.
That is a good question that I do not know the answer to, so I will have to follow up on that one and get back to you. Yes.
How do you determine what the harvest rate is?
So that is done through we call it our statewide angler survey program. Has anybody in the room ever been out fishing and had been interviewed by a creel clerk at a boat ramp or along the shoreline? So our creel clerks are out there randomly surveying anglers, and they ask you how long you've been fishing, what you caught, what you harvested. And through the design of that program, we can estimate how much time people are spending angling, how many fish they're catching, and how many fish they're harvesting. We do that typically through the open water season in April through October, though in some water bodies we do it through the winter as well. But that gives us that estimate of harvest for the given year. Yes.
Have your creel surveyors encountered any issues like with anglers that didn't want to share? And how they justify if anglers just fudging their numbers?
It does happen. You know, what we tell people when they say, well, I'm not going to tell you what I caught, that's only going to hurt the angler, because it's going to make the information that we're using to manage the fishery less accurate. Generally, I think they do find that most people are cooperative. I know some people find or think that our creel clerks are out there to issue tickets. They're not. They're not our law enforcement staff. They are simply there to learn more about how much time you invested in and what you caught when you're out angling.